So go ahead with your description. What?
Yeah. So when I get into this state, um, uh, two of the times I would kind of stay there for like at most a minute or not even a minute, and then I would kind of I would lose it, and it would start. I would kind of lose it, and then I would either try to go back to my breath and try to get into that state again, but so far that hasn't really worked. And the other time that it happened, it seemed a little bit more stable, and I stayed in it for about a minute, but then my timer on my meditation timer just went off, and so I got off the cushion.
Okay. Well, let us then talk about it from two different topics or two different time frames. One would be how, if this what you're talking about is first jhana, then how does one get into first jhana? And then the second question is, once you're there, what's worth doing?
Yeah.
All right. So the first thing is to understand what are the jhana factors. The factors of the first jhana. In the sutta, one or in fact, what I'm reading mentally right now is out of Sutta 119 on the Kaya Vipassana, and that in that place there is an example given of a bathsman preparing bath powder. Now, the analogy that I would use modern day would be the analogy of my grandmother making biscuits. The first thing she does, she dumps some flour out, and we can imagine then that what we're talking about here is the bath powder is the mind, or the flour is the mind. And then the next thing that the bathman does is he takes and dips his fingers in water and starts to sprinkle on the bath powder. And the water that he's sprinkling on has the quality of beginning to solidify the particles that would normally be blown up into the air, kind of the way that the mind is. So as we're beginning to add the water, add the juice, same with my grandmother, eventually it becomes a ball of dough. And that ball of dough has the quality that it doesn't ooze, that it's not dry, but it's kind of dry. And that another quality is that all of the powder that's in there is now part of the dough without very little or no powder left, because it changes color. The same thing is with the soap. All right. So that's the analogy. So now let's look at, well, what is the drops of water? What is the juice that's being added over and over and over again? Now, we have talked about anapanasati, and it sounds like that you're practicing fairly well. That in the practice of anapanasati, we begin to gather the factors of the first jhana together. And the most important factor of the first jhana is the freedom from hindrances. The mind is not thinking about whatever it likes to think about. More importantly, it's thinking about what's happening right now, this present moment. And so the mind is now redirected from the scattering into this present moment. The next thing is when we talk about the gladdening of the mind. First off, we experience the mind first as a mind in hindrance, and then we experience the mind free from hindrance. As we gladden the mind with the concept of, aha, I caught you, or with the possibility of having success. And then by doing that, we can now come back to the breath and start again. And this is the basic instructions that we do over and over again. Basically, each one of these times that we do that is like a drop. If we do it correctly, it's quite a drop. And so what we have to do is begin to understand the intensity that needs to be done in the practice, because there's a certain amount of intensity that is required. And also, if you think about it, in this regard, what we've defined and described so far is only 3 out of the 4 aspects of the Anapanasati in regard to the 4 foundations of mindfulness. We have the body with the breath and the feelings of the body and the experience of the body, even experiencing the temples, whatever, is all body. The next one is experiencing the mind. Experiencing the mind in the sense of what condition it's in. Now, this is kind of a training, but in the very beginning, the first thing is by having sati, by remembering, we recognize that the mind has wandered away from the breath. So we know the difference between hindrance and non-hindrance. In this regard, we know some about Dhammanupassana, or the contents or the objects of the mind. We're going to pay more attention to that in just a moment. But the point that I'm making now is that we're missing an entire quality of the show, which is called Vedana. And Vedana is the key to the whole thing and the way that it works. For one thing, Vedana, or that emotional system that we have, is the relationship between the body and the mind at its highest level. And not only that, but there's a continuum back and forth between these things. That information flows freely. And so one affects the other. And all right, so now we have to go with that. In fact, if we are gladdening the mind, then it should in fact have some kind of an impact or effect upon Vedana. Because otherwise, normally what meditators do, unless they're trained out of it, is that when they see and recognize the mind has wandered away from the breath, they don't like that. And so they're training themselves in bad feelings. And we need to start training ourselves in good feelings so that we can take over these feelings. You've already got bad feelings down solid. Every human being does, at least everyone who calls me. And can see the dukkha, though I'll describe it in great detail and help the students understand that everything is their own responsibility. That's the whole quality of the second noble truth. So, as we're progressing now, there is the addition of the Vedana. And this is kind of the time for that for you. Now, the first quality of Vedana, in fact, I'll give it to you, all 4 of them, as a kind of an overview. The first one is called rapture or piti, and we'll talk about it. The second one is then called sukha. Sukha is the Pali word and is often translated as pleasure, but a more important quality of it is satisfaction. Getting yourself into a state of complete satisfaction. Now, this piti and this rapture and this sukha that we're talking about are also jhana factors. They're listed right there as the qualities of the jhana, rapture and pleasure born of the seclusion. Now, in the beginning, we get secluded by getting off into some meditation hall or some Zen monastery or something. But then the real seclusion is the seclusion from the hindrances, to get that stuff out of the mind. And by doing so with the gladdening of the mind, there comes a new opportunity. Because in fact, now what we're doing is we're adding jhana factors. And when we add the jhana factors, and more specifically step 5 and 6, sukha and piti, by having those two factors there, now the mind is in first jhana and is fit for work. So now let's not talk yet about what the mind is fit for work. But in regard to it in brief, what is fit for work to do is to start watching what is in the Pali called Sita Sankara. Sita Sankara can be thought of as both mental formations in the sense of the thoughts that you have, or it can be understood in the sense of not mana and thinking, but rather the emotional stuff that gives rise to our current feeling systems. Because we rarely feel the way that we feel because of what's happening in the moment. We almost always feel the way that we felt before when this kind of situation happened before. So, in fact, we're talking about a habit pattern of the mind or a kind of memory system. And that this is also something that's worth watching. This is what the mind is fit for work to do, is to start doing this. Now, the next quality would be to tranquilize these mental formations. And the way that we would tranquilize them in the sense of thinking would be to choose which thoughts we're going to have. And tranquilizing the formations at the emotional level would also mean being able to choose which emotional feelings that we want to have. So that's the way that we look at Vedana in brief. Now let's go back and do it in depth. So the first thing I'm going to ask you is, what is piti? What is rapture? What is your idea of it?
Yeah. I've come to associate it with, maybe most distinctly, if I'm caught in a distraction or hindrance and I release it, I notice that it accompanies this like wave of tingly sensation that seems to go from the top of my head down to the bottom. And so I kind of think of it as this tingliness. I'm not sure if it's even necessarily pleasant. For whatever reason, it's just tingliness, that there's kind of a buzzing tingliness.
And you're not even sure if you like it or not.
I like it, and well, it seems to accompany happiness. I'm not sure if the tingling itself is pleasant or if there's tingling and also pleasantness as a separate thing. But I've noticed that in this state, I tend to just almost automatically start smiling, and it can even get to the point where I get a little tired of smiling.
Okay. Tired of smiling in the sense that your lips hurt?
Yeah, the muscles aren't used to smiling for 20 minutes, you know?
I see. let's start exercising them smile muscles. Let's get them up to scratch. Okay, so let's talk about rapture in a way that it is experienced in the normal world. In the normal world, people are doing things to get rapture or to get pity, and that they do it sometimes consciously, sometimes half consciously, sometimes unconsciously. Wanting to have that feeling often starts arguments because they don't get it. Now, and basically, when an argument is started, is because I say something and I want you to agree with me. If you agree with me, then I win. If you don't agree with me, then I don't get that feeling of winning because I don't get the hit of juice that I'm looking for. I began to get unhappy instead out of disappointment. All right. Now let's look at it at another level. This is the sensations and the feelings and the overall experience of what the runner who's running the 100-yard dash, that's what he wants when he finishes and wins the race. And so when he in fact does win the race and he knows that he's winning the race, right at the last moment before he crosses the finish line, he knows he's won the race. And that's why he can throw his hands in the air and let the ribbon get hit by his chest, because his chest is out. It happens just like that. That sudden instant recognition that I'm a winner, that I've won, that I'm successful. In fact, the correct word is successful, but the word successful in English language is a really, really weak word. And we need some kind of really strong word. Because, in fact, if you think about it, this is what rules the lives of almost all of humanity, is wanting the thrill of winning. People go to casinos and throw slots, throw coin after coin in the coin slot. Why? Not because of the return of the coins in the slot, because ultimately they're losing money and they know it. But they still play those slots because they want the thrill of the win. That's why people gamble, is for the thrill of the win. I won. Never mind how much I won. It's just that I won. And so that whole quality of the thrill of winning is actually built right into the psyche of us humans. And that the Buddha wants you to start exercising that and putting it to work and building on it. The high quality of success, even if the success is nothing more than recognizing that the mind was in hindrance, it had wandered away, but that's a success. Why is that a success? It's a success because if you do that over and over again, then it builds the confidence that you in fact can do this. And through that, it builds the confidence that not only can you do this now, but you can do it when you need it most. And therefore, you are, in fact, free. This is my path to freedom from all of life sucking. And life sucks. You know it does, or you wouldn't have called me. And all we have to do to make life stop sucking is by stop sucking. Because we're sucking on life, we want it to give us something. When we become satisfied and stop sucking, then life don't suck no more. It's quite satisfying instead. And it's merely a change of attitude. But this attitude does not come easy, because there's some old DNA juice that's in there. There's a lot of religious history that is built on the mental society all over the world is influenced by religions of one kind or another. And one of the major jobs of religions is to make people to feel bad so that the religion has something to offer. And so the Christians talk about sin. And all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. And anybody who can actually think and smile can say, I'm good to go, thank you very much. But no, we don't. As a whole culture, we buy that trip. It's sold to us as the culture itself, even when we're little kids. Now, when we talk about culture and little kids don't understand a wide, worldwide culture and the net and the way that we can conceptualize it. But a kid does have to deal with that culture moment by moment, day by day, with his teachers and his mother and dad and the family and everyone she comes in contact with is going to throw a little bit of their own poison of the culture onto that kid until the kid is covered with that culture. And most of that culture is, you're not good enough. And the kid buys that trip because, after all, us kids are really little and those adults are big and they'll slap us around if they don't like what we do. And so we feel already victimized by the society just in nature. And if we keep that attitude the rest of our life sucks. Sometime along the line, somebody's got to call Dhammarato on Skype and figure out that, hey, I can change my attitude, but I have to change it often. And I have to change it bigly when I do it. And so this is why we talk about rapture, is because rapture is the word in the Pali that actually is talking about bigly. It's the very best that you could ever feel. And that's what you've been searching for. And not only that, but when people get it, but they don't know quite exactly what it is or how they get it, then they become confused and start using different languages. It's really crazy things. Like, I just experienced God. No, you didn't. You just had a good feeling. You just had a high. Shut up and start over again and have it again instead of bragging about it. The other one is, oh, I'm an arahat. Or that's brain entry. You know, they think of these things as events rather than the process of purification or the habit forming. And we have to form this habit of being very joyful because we're extraordinarily successful, because we, in fact, have found the very best thing there is that's offerable to humanity, and that's the Buddha Dhamma. It really is that good of stuff. It will liberate you, and you've got it. And you need to celebrate that every time you can remember to celebrate it. And so this is what we mean by bringing in intensity and focus into the practice. You can also talk about it in the sense of dedication. This quality of adding the Vedana on top of already the gladdening of the mind is what will then, first off, these are the jhana factors to get this stuff going, to really, really feel good. That's the whole quality of the piti, but it may not last for very long. In fact, we want to let it settle down, just like the guy who ran the race. Within a moment or two, he's going to be on a knee. He's going to take a knee and take a deep breath and relax. So that's what we're going to do after the rapture, is we're going to relax. You can think of it in this way, that first success and then the satisfaction of the success. You can also think about it as is that the rapture is a deep in-breath, like that. And then the sukha is a very, very relaxed, beautiful out-breath. And to now, this is the point when we've got the jhana factors collected together. Why? Because the mind is free. The mind is free from hindrances. The mind is not only free, but it's ecstatic about being free. That this is the freedom itself. And so we've got the rapture and we've got the sukha that's built into this practice. It gives us a way to sit in a state of really beautiful, beautiful, steady sukha, joy, satisfaction, all of these kind of words. And from there, this is about the time that we then start allowing the breath to become a normal breath again as we become relaxed and steady. Because now we've got a job to do. The next job we do for you or for the beginning is to start watching thoughts. That the very quality of the hindrances that come into the mind are the kind of thoughts that are unwholesome. So now in this state, instead of focusing on skulls or whatever like that, we're going to start watching the thoughts in the sense of not allowing unwholesome thoughts in. Thoughts of the past, out. Thoughts of the future, out. You stand in guard, not letting thoughts of, oh, I really wish I was enlightened, or maybe I can get enlightened this way, and coming in and wanting something. No, this is a state of satisfaction. You really like this place. The only thing that we want is to stay the way things are. And so we chase out all of those unwholesome thoughts. Thoughts about the future, thoughts about wanting things, thoughts about the past, especially about the past, because the past is actually what we're eventually going to be dealing with in great detail. So that's the main thing that we start doing. Eventually, you'll also begin to see other things come up that are not actually thoughts. They're deeper than that. Things like anxiety itself, or the feeling of having been attacked, other things like this. But as you think about it, when you nod your head, feeling of being attacked, you've been attacked before. You know how to feel when you're attacked, so that the next time that you become attacked, you know exactly how to feel, right? No, you don't. You're going to be feeling pity and success. You're not going to be feeling the way that you used to feel. You're not going to let that stuff in either.
Yeah.
You can begin to change the way that you feel once when the mind is fit for work. And this is what's called the first jhana. It's where we do want the thoughts to happen. We don't want to deal with the feelings just directly, but we can, in fact, be on guard for the thoughts well enough that we can stop the thoughts altogether. Not only can we stop the unwholesome thoughts, we can stop the wholesome ones too. And then we can really deal with the feelings. That's in fact what second jhana is all about. Is when those thoughts go away. Now we sit in that state of sukha of the first jhana, but without the thoughts. Now defines the second jhana, but still the work to do is to watch what the mind is bubbling and churning about. And in fact, it begins to feel like a really big bubbling and churning. And so the analogy that the Buddha uses is the analogy of a artesian well that's at the bottom of a pool of water or a pond. You know what I mean by an artesian well?
No.
An artesian well is a well that's a spring that just springs right out of the ground. Sometimes it gushes, and sometimes it kind of leaks. It depends upon how much water it is and how big the hill is and how much water there is in the hill and all kinds of things. But quite often, the farmers will take and build a dam around that artesian well to turn it into a pond. So in that pond now, if you go swimming in that pond and you go right to the right place, it's going to have the effect of that cold water that's bubbling and churning out of that artesian well, mixing with the warmer water that's in the pond because it's been heated some by the sun. And it is, I actually had an artesian well, not just experience, but I've had one across the street from the house for a couple of years. And we used to go swimming a lot in that artesian well, and that was in that pond, and that was the favorite thing to do, is to go down to that point where that artesian well was, and just, oh, what an experience. Now, that's the kind of rapture then that comes with the second jhana, because all of that stuff that's in the body is, and the, let us say, the electrical system, with the thoughts now being shut down, and the witness is still there, the one who's watching, the guy who's sitting on the sukha cushion and watching what's going on. This bubbling and churning that in the beginning looks quite mild and needs some inspection, eventually becomes almost overwhelming. And it can be experienced as bodily sensation. It can be experienced as emotions coming up. But as the emotions come up, you can start to control the quality so that it like gushes with joy. But all of it has to do with the quality of just watching these feelings. Basically, you could also say all of this gushing that I'm talking about is the stuff that's already happening right this very minute in your body, and you just don't even pay attention to it. And when you start paying close attention, you'll begin to see what turmoil the human body mind complex is in.
Yeah, I noticed that when I kind of got near whatever this state was, it's almost like I could see little things happening in my mind very rapidly, and there would be there would be little anticipation of like, oh, something's happening, and then there would be a little like, oh, I hope it doesn't mess up, and then but these things were happening very rapidly, and yeah.
Okay. So now that you've been in First Jhana and you know what it is, now with this conversation, you know how to get yourself back into that state. The state that you were in was a state of sukha, but you probably didn't enter it from the state of rapture. And it's much easier to enter from the state of rapture because rapture is like a high that kind of slides or melts down into the satisfaction. If you have that hit of success, the success then will melt into satisfaction. And with that satisfaction comes all of the other ingredients that we look for at that state. And that would be safety, security, ease, comfort, but mostly satisfaction, contentment. I like this. This is good stuff. And from that place, you can then begin to see that bubbling and boiling, and you can also see the thoughts. It's not necessary to stop the thoughts to see the bubbling also. But if you do stop the thoughts, then the bubbling will become more and more obvious to the point that it's almost overwhelming. And so then the third jhana, for description's sake, because I really haven't told you how to get into the second jhana, just was there. But that boiling and bubbling that we are talking about in that artesian well then becomes like a fast flowing stream. And the object there is, though the lotus flower is overwhelmed with all of this fast flowing stream is completely submerged, the lotus flower is strong enough to stand up to that current and do so and become dry, that it was no longer affected by the fast flowing feelings that we're talking about in this sense of Sita Sankara. So that's the analogy, is that we go into it and gain strength over it so that it's no longer important. In one version, they call it tranquilized. It's not so much of tranquilized as that we've kind of put a lid on it. like putting the sewer lid back on the sewer. So this is the way that we correctly practice, bringing Vedana in so that we gain those two jhana factors of absolute success. And so that comes through and by the gladdening of the mind. Both of them are built in success. So you begin to feel really successful at meditation. It begins to change your attitude. The attitude is, I can do this.
Yeah.
And with that attitude, I can do this, comes even greater joy because you recognize what enormous value this is. And that you're the winner. You've got it.
Yeah.
And you get it every time you remember to think about it and take it on. And so you make these feelings a habit. And by doing so, you begin to not want so much other stuff because this stuff is good. Good enough. And it is, in fact, mentally manufacturing the very best that humanity has to offer already anyway. That's the stuff that everybody's going for. That's what the real estate agent goes for. When she wants that signed contract she's been working months on to get both the buyer and the seller's signature, and she grabs that contract. It's mine. I've got it. I finally got my contract, you know.
Yeah.
So this is that kind of feeling. People get it in work sometimes, having met a deadline, getting a promotion, that kind of stuff. That's what people want because they want the feeling. The money's good, but the feeling of success is what people are looking for. And now that you know that, and you know that you can create it for yourself through your own mind by becoming successful at your own meditation, and whoop-de-doo, you've got the very best thing that life has to offer.
Mm.
All you have to do is remember and practice.
Yeah. Good. Okay.
Okay. So bring some intensity to your practice.
Yeah.
In the direction of intensely feeling really good, really satisfied. Taking a really deep breath, really satisfying. High quality breath.
Cool. Yeah.
Do you have any questions?
Nothing specific. I think I'll need to sit. I'm a little bit confused on kind of mapping what I have already experienced to first jhana and sort of which factors were present. But I think that will
Okay.
come.
All right. Don't spend too much time with the mapping. Spend more time on the development of that high.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely.
All right. Well, we'll see you later. Good luck. I expect to hear back. I
Yep.
expect to see you dancing when the next time you call.
Awesome. All right, bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.